Okay, for context, James and I couldn't make the recent Barbenheimer episode that the group did, which, if you haven't heard it yet, is amazing. And James and I can tend to have some pretty different opinions on films. So we wanted to record an episode which is just us discussing our very different takes on the movie Oppenheimer. This is it. It's a bonus episode, and I think you're going to get a kick out of it. Enjoy. It's already recording.
We're already recording?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think we should make... I don't know. I think it's just beyond that troll.
We won't use that.
We might. No. You should see Doctor Strangelove, though. It's, well, shit, I was going to say you'd really like it, but I don't know what's real anymore.
Yeah,
I suggest something that I'm so sure is objectively a great movie. You're like, no, I've seen it. I hate it. I hate it so much. And that just, every time it kills me. But every time, I set myself up for it. I should really just learn.
Yeah, I recently watched again Old Country, No Country for Old Men.
Yeah, you didn't like it, did you?
Fucking hate it. Yeah, yeah. I
don't
absolutely love it up until the last third, maybe the last quarter of the film, and then I just feel like the entire drive of the movie just drops off.
But if you like 2/3 of it, if you love 2/3 of it, that rounds up to
it's all very good, but you do gotta stick to the landing. A story is a complete story.
See, I think it stuck landing just fine, but madness, absolute madness. But books so far were 1 for 1. I'm reading Imperium, and
yes, I heard the podcast the other day. Yeah, I'm delighted.
I
knew that would be up your alley. Yeah.
Yes, it is. I would like him to stop and smell the roses a little bit. And I'm coming off the back of Hilary Mantel, where she stops and smells every rose that she describes over the course of 600 pages. And Imperium is brisk. But that's okay. I'm getting to the court case now in the middle, and it's fucking banging, man. It's very, very good.
Yeah, they stay strong. Just two more books after that. They're all great. I
didn't know that was a trilogy. In fact, I think I remember you telling me this, but we'd had a little bit of asking that one. So,
a little bit of what?
We'd had a little bit to drink, I think, on the night you were telling me.
Oh yes. Yeah. Details got missed, but the main thrust
details. Yeah. But speaking of Oppenheimer, I want to ask you what you didn't like about it, because for the sake of people that are listening to this, I loved it. I said 9.5 stars, and within half a star of that, I think so. I think it was astounding. But you weren't really a fan.
So for the listeners, I ended up going to see it twice because I really did enjoy it the first time.
Really didn't enjoy it. Oh,
really didn't enjoy it. Yeah,
that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, and then I listened to our podcast, and everyone loved it. And then the reviews are pouring in, and the film that they're describing is not the film that I saw in the reviews, and the film that they're describing is a film that I would really like to have seen. So, I went to see the second time, so I've spent 6 hours.
What do you think the
Cillian Murphy's Oppenheimer?
Yeah, Cillian. Yeah, well, he was. I mean, do you agree that he was a very, very good Oppenheimer?
Ooh. He's a very, very good actor. So I think an issue for me is that I've read an awful lot about the Manhattan Project and Los Alamos,
right,
and the people involved. So I think I was expecting a different focus, or I was expecting a couple different things to come up, because my concept of how to tell that story would probably have focused on different elements. So I know that the book that the film is based on came out in 2005.
American Prometheus?
Yeah.
Haven't read it, but I'm aware of it.
Which is obviously very American focused and very Oppenheimer focused. And I know a lot more details were declassified around 2017, 2018. So a number of books that came out around 2020, 2019 just have a lot more detail.
Okay.
And a lot more, I guess they just have different pictures. So these were a bit of the books that I would have read about the project. They'd probably be more expansive than if you just take the Oppenheimer story.
Yeah, I mean, it was already 3 hours long. So, and with history, there's infinite details that you could delve into. It's always going to be choosing what details do you choose, what details do you leave out. I was surprised by the details they left in until 2/3 of the way through. I'm like, oh yeah, this is a movie about Oppenheimer the man, not necessarily the Cold War or the Second World War or the
Yes.
Manhattan Project. So
Yeah, I feel like the film focused on the events after the war, the trial, and I feel
yeah,
like the conflicts that the character was in was his questioning and him having to answer why he met with certain people or why he did certain things, which is the not the most compelling elements of that story for me. I would have really
mm-hmm.
liked to have seen some more debate about why would we develop the bomb. There are a handful of scenes in which it is suggested that they shouldn't do it, but this tends to be framed as we shouldn't do it, and then Oppenheimer says we should do it for this reason, and then the scene moves on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of shocked that these were to me, that's the meat of that story. That's the thing I wanted to see going in. But
Yes.
there's only a handful of scenes, and they tended to be one scene, maybe 2 or 3 lines of dialogue back and forth.
We should probably say right now that there's going to be spoilers for Oppenheimer in this discussion.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, I'm assuming anyone who's listening to this is
yes.
yeah. So for me, there was big elements of the moral and ethical debates, the back and forth arguments, and Oppenheimer's place within that, and I just didn't see explored in a way that I was looking forward to
Yes.
seeing explored.
That would have been interesting, but
Oh, I feel like you're gearing up to blast me.
no, not blast, not blast. Respond
Yeah,
to what you've said, but no,
yeah.
you say your piece, Healy. You say it.
Okay, well, yeah, I'll finish up quickly then. I guess there's a few points in history that I think are very interesting and very compelling that I feel the film didn't focus on or left out. And because of the non-linear nature of the film and my familiarity with the subject matter, I kept trying to figure out where things were happening in place and time,
Yes.
particularly in the beginning, up until he met Leslie Groves. And the fact that it jumps to the end of the war at the midpoint of the film changes the narrative of the events a little bit. I think that I just wasn't that interested in the things that the film chose to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the first time I went to see it, the music drowned out an awful lot of the dialogue. Second time I went to see it, something was different. The balance was changed, so I was able to hear it a lot clearer.
That's the old Christopher Nolan complaint, isn't it? That the dialogue gets drowned out by the sound. And in my cinema, it was also very good. I paid for like ultra luxe, giganto sound, mega vision, and those extra $5 were worth it.
Yeah, because we went to like the private screening the first time.
Okay.
And an awful lot of the scenes where the music was just, you could make out what was being said, but everything was being lost because you were so focused on the fact that the sound was overshadowing what was being discussed.
Yeah. Straining to hear isn't great.
Yeah. That's me.
Okay.
Lay it on me.
Okay. Well, actually, I kind of agree with what you said, where to me as well, the geopolitical titans clashing and the ethical arguments for and against the bomb, that is like crack to me. I find that so interesting. Like I listened to a long form podcast that wasn't Dan Carlin beforehand, and I've re-listened to his, I want to say 4-hour atomic bomb one that you may have heard.
Supernova?
No, I mean, like there's a lot of, Dan Carlin does a lot of stuff, but the point is I had a reasonable amount of knowledge going in, and to me that is the interesting stuff. However, that they choose to focus on the political stuff and his persecution and the like, were you a communist sympathizer? Are you loyal to the country? Are you a traitor? Were you spying? To me, at least, they made that so interesting that it didn't matter. They brought that stuff to life. And I think it makes perfect sense. If this is an Oppenheimer film, which it is, I mean, the man's name is in the title, then you're going to focus on the nation's interrogation of the man, on his affiliations, on his loyalties. And I think they kind of did get... So in the course of events, there are people asking him like, but should we do this? And he brushes them off like, yes, of course, this is the right thing to do. He doesn't interrogate it. I don't think the man would have interrogated it. I mean, he would have been caught up in the frenzy of the day-to-day building the bomb, making the Manhattan Project. I totally believe that he wouldn't have time to stop and think and analyze. And maybe part of him knew that if he did, that might cause it all to come crashing down. And towards the end of those events, he does start to interrogate, and there is the guilt, like that scene with the president who is the haberdasher, Truman, like he clearly shows guilt there. So I liked that. I thought it was fine.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I agree with that evaluation of Oppenheimer. I do have a quote here from him which would back that up. When you see something that is technically sweet, you go ahead and do it, and you argue about it only after you have had your technical success. That is the way it was with the atomic bomb.
That's
So
how
I do think
yeah.
that he was a person who was very, like it said, he was involved in the theory and didn't think too practically about what would happen afterwards. However, he did become aware during the project that the Nazis weren't building a bomb. He did also talk an awful lot of scientists into staying with the project after the war with the Nazis ended. And the project nearly came to a stop because all the scientists started saying, why are we going to continue with this? So I find that element of him very engaging as well, because you can read it on the one hand as he was genuinely very idealistic and thought that the politicians or the military minds who had the bomb afterwards would be as responsible as he thought maybe he would have been or scientists would have been.
Which I thought was covered in the film myself, but
a little.
Oh no, I think that was that definitely came across.
Yeah.
That scene where the bomb is being taken away.
For me, that would have been, if I was telling that story, that would have been what the whole film was about.
Fair. Yeah.
Or I would have framed him as someone who was just telling people what he thought they needed to hear to keep them on the project. Because the project wouldn't have been completed if certain people had dropped out.
Yes.
I also think Oppenheimer is a very interesting character in contrast with the other ideas and the other moral attitudes that were working against him.
Yes.
So I kind of feel like he's more interesting if you include some of the other scientists like Bohr and Klaus Fox, who was barely in it. He was the spy who ended up getting it to the Russians.
Yes.
Who was in a lot of ways had the opposite attitude.
When they showed and this guy was the spy, I was like, wait, who have we seen him? Which I think was maybe a bit of a mistake. It would have been from a narrative, from a writing point of view, you want to show the guy who's a spy. So when there's the reveal, it's like, oh, that guy, rather than did we see him? I don't. So that was a missed opportunity in hindsight. I agree.
For me, I felt like the film was just full of that, because I was like, oh, really? Is that how they're showing that moment? Because there could have been this, there could have been that, there could have been the other. I think a lot of it was based on the limited information that the book had at the time and the fact that it is Oppenheimer's perspective, largely. Maybe he didn't pay much attention to Klaus Fuchs. But I feel like the scientists in general got very little screen time.
There were an
I'm
awful
surprised
lot of them.
They didn't. There were a lot of them, but there would only have been somewhere around 10 who would have been responsible for breakthroughs, who would have been really in control of what was happening and how things were moving. There was legitimately only about 20 of them in the world who were the top scientists in the area, and they all knew each other. They were all friends. They all went to one another's weddings and stuff over the years. They all studied together and went on holidays together. So they were all a close-knit group of friends who shared information and grown together and studied their disciplines together. So I was kind of surprised that there wasn't names attached or even dates and places. I thought that would have assisted a lot as it moved around a bit.
Yeah, they could have been more fleshed out, but when I compare it to the length of the film and the things that they did want to focus on, I just think where could they possibly put that in? And by de-emphasizing, the emphasis on the film turned out to be his rivalry with the guy played by Robert Downey Jr., whose name I don't remember, Strauss, yeah. Which that wasn't my favorite part about the film, but it was the choice they made, and I still thought they did it really well, and I still found it really interesting. With that, as well as everything else, how long can a film be? It was already 3 hours. So the antagonism with Strauss, do you think that should have been de-emphasized, not a main part of the story?
I guess it depends on what's the story you're telling.
Well,
I think that's where my main issue comes in, is that I think the story that they were telling was not the story I expected. And I thought there was more interesting stories to tell about Oppenheimer.
That involved Oppenheimer or about Oppenheimer? Because
about Oppenheimer, if you want to make Oppenheimer the focus, I was surprised that there was very little science in the film and very little about the actual development of the bomb and the steps that they took from one thing to the next, because it's sort of from Oppenheimer's perspective, and what he was most engaged in was the science and was the development and was the tinkering and figuring it out. And they were creating this thing that was, on the one hand, a bomb, but it was a bomb using materials that we were only coming to understand. It's very much like magic, what they were doing.
Yeah, the new science, they keep calling it, right?
Yeah.
It's this entirely new thing that America really hadn't even begun to explore yet. Yeah.
And this is what animated Oppenheimer, and this is what he was focused on, this is what he loved. And I would have liked to have seen a lot more of that, because I think if they could make the audience fall in love or be interested in those aspects of things and become focused on those aspects of things, you could frame how they weren't thinking about what was coming on the far end of that. I also think that,
you can go. I can wait. I can be patient.
I also think that I would have liked to have seen, I guess his motivations are like, why did they think they should keep going, and when they thought the atmosphere could be set on fire? That was a concern kind of throughout the project. I know the film puts it in just a few scenes at the beginning, but that was a constant thing that they were like.
No, it was mentioned later as well, I think. Yeah, I think they mentioned that a few times. Like, I liked how much they mentioned that personally, and yeah, they would have been foolish not to include that, because damn, goddamn.
Yeah.
I can't think of a mainstream film, and this is a mainstream film, that has been more science dense. Off the top of my head, this is the most science dense film that I could think of.
Okay.
I mean, how many films even get into quantum physics, and only does a little bit, but they still got into the science more than I was expecting them to. There were whole blocks where they're brainstorming, like at the Los Alamos, and the physicists are just talking physics talk. And to me, that was like incredibly engaging. Like, I like physics more than I would say most people. I still really didn't know what they were talking about. But it's that, we've talked about technobabble on the podcast before. There was a beautiful technobabble to it, where they're giving us just enough information about it, and they're talking about it in just the right way for us to kind of get it and kind of know that what they're talking about is important. I mean, to have even more science in the film, I would have liked it personally, but at what point do like the producers of a major Hollywood movie start to say, like, guys, I don't know if we can sell this, because it was already, there was a lot of science in there. Like, they had a film not only about a scientist, but about, to an extent, about science, and that did really well. I think that's kind of a miracle in and of itself. I feel like I'm an apologist right now. Like, I feel like I'm apologizing for the film, but I shouldn't, because it's good, James. It's a good movie.
You liked it.
I did. Yeah, I really did. I really did. I saw it with my girlfriend, and she enjoyed it too. But she said, like, honestly, a lot of it went over my head. I mean, she's an intelligent person, but I think without a lot of historical knowledge, you can only enjoy it so much. Okay. But she still enjoyed it, so I think that also says something.
Yeah, I would love to recommend Peter Watson's Fallout to you.
Okay,
I think that's probably one of my favorite retellings of the development of the bomb and stuff.
It's going into a Google tab.
Definitely.
There you go.
Sweet.
Okay, so how much have you? I mean, I've listened to 2 podcasts, one of which I listened to twice, and I've heard bits and pieces like around. But when you said, like, I know a little bit about this, like, it seems like you've read some books, like you actually have a little bit of knowledge.
Yes. I spent the last 2 days trying to rustle up 1 or 2 of the books that I've read to just kind of refresh myself or to give recommendations. I've probably read 4 or 5 books.
Holy shit.
Printed since 2019.
Wow.
About Los Alamos, the Manhattan Project.
Early stages of the Cold War, stuff like that.
Early stages of Cold War.
Yeah.
And what is essentially considered now to be like the conspiracy that resulted in the bomb being built.
Okay. Wait, that's interesting. Tell us more about that.
So I guess if you look at it from the different perspectives, I think these would look at it as different perspectives of the scientists. I think James Chadwick, who was either the guy who discovered the neutron or the guy who split the nucleus, he was of the belief that once it was discovered that a bomb could be built, it inevitably would be built. He's one of those people who interprets history as being like train tracks, like it's inevitable, no matter like we're just on that course.
Yeah, it turned out he was onto something.
Well, Niels Bohr was of the belief that if everything hadn't happened exactly the way it did when it did, it never would have happened. Which is the other way of interpreting history, that everything has to slot together just the right way. He believed that scientists would never have built the bomb.
They would never have developed the idea of the bomb, or they just would never have built it?
They never would have built a bomb. They would have done something else with the science that wasn't the bomb if it hadn't been for war, and if it hadn't been for the compartmentalization that went into the Manhattan Project in Los Alamos, and the fact that a ton of information was withheld from them during the course of the building, because they were saying that the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing.
Yeah, well, that seems deliberate if you want to get these scientists with liberal tendencies and peacenik ideologies to build a super weapon, right?
Yeah, because they're so focused on their own part of it that they're not seeing how much of the actual bombs being developed, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, or how necessary or not necessary it actually is in the course of the war, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of speculation about the German side of things, because people said that the scientists working for the Germans intentionally misled the project.
I've heard that as well.
Other people said that they failed. So it could be, some of this could be them reframing things after the war. Heisenberg, being the director of the German project, said that he misled the project, but then there was no evidence that he did, and a lot of people, including Niels Bohr, believed that he was pro the Germans winning the war. So there's a lot of speculation about that. But definitely British intelligence and British sabotage. They'd orchestrated a system of spies within the German scientific projects, and engineers that were working on the project were causing sabotage. They think the facility that was developing the petroleum was being tampered with, and maybe it was a facility that was very necessary to developing something. They kept breaking
heavy
things
water.
out.
I remember heavy water comes up a lot in this whole story.
Heavy water was a big deal.
They got to get the heavy water. They got to sabotage the heavy water.
Yeah,
that heavy water, man.
So the Nazis had become convinced that heavy water was what they needed to slow down the reaction.
When it was actually graphite.
Yes.
And
the British kept launching attacks on the heavy water facility with like special ops paratroopers parachuting in.
With straws to just drink the shit out of it.
No, purely as fake attacks to convince the Nazis that
it wasn't straws, okay.
Heavy water is what they needed. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
So they were launching fake attacks on the heavy water facility.
Man, I want to see this movie. Like, I want to see it as well as Oppenheimer, which exactly I think was a brilliant film. But that would have been a very different movie. I mean, that's not Oppenheimer. That's I mean, it's amazing that this one thing has so many different facets that you could tell. So many
different elements. Yeah. And you have all of the scientists escaping Germany, trying to get visas, sneaking out of the different countries. Niels Bohr mentions his trip across the Atlantic, or it's out of Copenhagen, maybe, where he's
where he's
the back of a plane.
Yeah, in like a Bombay or something. He runs out of oxygen. Yeah. I remember hearing about that.
Like, such a terrifying experience.
Yes.
And he lands on the far side and he kind of shrugs it off as if he'd gone to sleep.
There were so many points in the film where I wanted to stand up and point at the screen and yell, I know that. I know what's happening here. But no one wants that.
So yes, the conspiracy was essentially that the British had learned that the Nazis weren't developing a bomb, and they shared this with the Americans. And it's arguable. I'll argue for the Americans and state that because they were having so much success in their bomb development, they just didn't believe this. The Americans were also very paranoid and tended to be quite mistrusting of foreigners. So it's possible that they didn't trust the British intelligence.
No.
Yeah. So key figures would have known the Nazis weren't developing a bomb, didn't share this with the scientists. By the time Niels Bohr and Klaus Fuchs, the spy, and a number of other scientists who escaped Europe, by the time they joined the project, they also knew that the Nazi project was kind of dead-ended. It wasn't going anywhere.
Yes.
So Oppenheimer would also have spoken with Niels Bohr about this and likely knew the Germans weren't developing a bomb, but didn't share this with the other scientists. And then they did keep the scientists all separated so that when the war did end and the scientists started talking about maybe stopping it, Oppenheimer met with them and kind of was like, no, we should keep going. But then everyone was separated. So not everyone knew that everyone was thinking of leaving.
Right.
But Oppenheimer would have known that everyone was thinking of leaving and having separate conversations with everyone about why they should stay.
Right.
So the argument that the bomb would have been inevitable is dependent on the fact that there would have been scientists to develop the bomb. And Niels Bohr was of the opinion that scientists would not work on something like that if they haven't been so misled and cajoled and tricked. And I love the idea of Niels Bohr. This is if things did pan out the way they panned out. But there is an argument that Niels Bohr knew that the scientists working for the Germans had not wanted to build it and derailed the experiment. And then he escaped war-torn Europe and got to America, finding to his horror the scientists that had gotten away from the Nazis were doing the very thing for the Americans under the impression that they were trying to beat the Nazis in doing it. I find that moment a very compelling moment as well.
That's very intriguing. And like we said, there's so many things that the film didn't have, but like just as a biopic of the man Oppenheimer during his years developing the bomb, just in that limited frame.
Well, like I can see it's a very well-made film.
Okay, that's all I want to hear, man. That's all I need.
No, I'm not.
Just need to know I'm not crazy.
No, it's not that I can't recognize that it was very good, very technically well made. I guess I was just alarmed at how they were very efficiently moving through certain stages of the story, expanding other parts of the story. It was more from a focus and storytelling point of view.
Oh, that makes sense. It was brisk. It was very brisk. I often don't like films that just like bam, 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 race through scenes. Oppenheimer really did. And considering like how amazing the sets and everything were in each scene, I was just like almost imagining like a cash counter in the bottom left-hand corner rolling with like 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. Like this must have cost a fortune to make. 3 hours and like 1 million sets, so many characters. And yet, they didn't linger on anything. They just kind of churned through scenes. I thought it actually worked very well. To me, the pace was brisk and we got just enough information at any point. Never felt bored at all.
Yeah, definitely never felt bored.
Yeah. Do you think it was too fast?
It was very efficient. For me, I was just wondering why. I guess I couldn't really wrap my head around it again because I'm still trying to figure out why that story was told and not this story.
Yeah.
So they were very efficient. They put a lot in, but then I was still kind of surprised at how little they didn't put in.
Yeah.
I was surprised by what they chose to put in.
Yeah.
What they chose to linger on as opposed to what they chose to move through quickly.
This could be a
product. But again, it's a vision thing. It's a focus thing. So.
Yeah. Maybe to Christopher, I don't know who wrote the film, but maybe to.
It's based on a book.
Oh yeah, American Prometheus. Okay.
So they were just adapting that.
Well, maybe to just whoever was involved in making the film, and maybe the writer, the most interesting aspect to tell was his rise and fall as a instrument of the American security apparatus.
Yes.
Because it did focus on that. That's not interesting.
Did you watch the podcast that the team did on the episode?
No, because I didn't want spoilers. And I still haven't seen Barbie. So until I see that.
Well, when you have seen Barbie, Ali makes a very good point about Christopher Nolan's personal life related to his third, less known brother, which might indicate why he maybe resonated with that book or that story in history and why he might have chosen to write the story.
That's interesting, taking the psychoanalytic lens on this. I'm a little skeptical, I gotta say, but I'll watch it. I'll keep that in mind. By the way, listener, listen to our Barbenheimer episode, which is a fantastic combination of Barbie and Oppenheimer, comparing them 1-to-1 against each other. Listen now in your podcast player of choice.
It is very good.
Yeah. No, that is interesting. And I know nothing about the guy, and if that can shed light on why, then
yeah, I think it makes sense.
Okay. What do you think of the performances?
Everyone's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. Robert Downey Jr. was not Robert Downey Jr. I love it when an actor plays someone who is so different to what they usually play and they nail it. It's like, oh wow, this person has this whole other range. It's very impressive.
He has wonderful kind of tics and quirks that he puts into the performance. There's one point where they're having the meeting at the dinner when they found the Russian test has gone off, and Cillian Murphy's character says something to the effect of, maybe we don't need to tell the president, or the president doesn't know. He turns around and implies the president really needs to know, and then he kind of does this little thing afterwards, and it was so idiosyncratic.
I know the exact thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
This isn't really based on that, but I thought it was really funny. So I heard that Richard Feynman is in the film. Richard Feynman is a physicist. He is known for playing the bongos. It's like one of the things he's known for. And he doesn't, I don't even know if he has a speaking role in the film, but every now and again, there's just like a physicist that the camera pans over. He's just like rocking out on the bongos as hard as he can. And that's just the way of saying like, oh yeah, by the way, Richard Feynman is here. Whether or not he'd be playing the bongos at all times, I'd probably not, but that was a shorthand for this is Richard Feynman.
So we need to how do we differentiate the characters?
Yes. This guy is very tall. This guy plays the bongos, pick the one thing. Any thoughts on the special effects?
Yeah, pretty phenomenal. I thought the build up to the detonation of the bomb, it's electric. It is your breath. You can feel it stop as I'm warming up to that moment. I believe they did a lot of practical special effects with some CGI done over it in order to get that.
Yeah, I heard it was they used layering to take a smaller explosion, layer it on top of the film to make it look like it's far away, and then something. But I think there was something about Christopher Nolan saying he really didn't want to use CGI any more than necessary to make it seem very so that there felt like there was no artifice to it. Like this is as real as you can get.
We've seen a lot of CGI explosions, and I remember the scenes of the fire blooming up looked like real fire. It looked like you were seeing something Some of that wasn't CGI.
Yeah, that was very impressive. Like the tension was very palpable all the way throughout. And the sound design. Like I'm a big sound guy as well, and that was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I love the break of silence before the blast.
Yes.
Really
yes.
Cool. Very cool.
I mean, I feel like you've made some concessions here, which is very generous of you.
I've made some concessions. I can grow.
Yeah, good. There's still hope for you yet.
I definitely think that we could do our own episode on just listing off films that we both have extremely different feelings about.
Well, when we get to No Country for Old Men, that's going to be a lot of me standing and pointing and yelling. So just apologies in advance. Out of the books that you've read on the subject, what is like the big ones or one that you would recommend?
The only one that I would recommend is Fallout by Peter Watson. It covers the most stuff, and then it is also structured where he like introduces the scientists as like fucking rock stars, but also like they're main characters in this ongoing battle for the future of mankind, essentially. Yeah. They're all within their roles of building the bomb, but their ideologies and their decisions on how to take action are being played out along the way. Niels Bohr chose to travel around America meeting with politicians and speaking. And I can't remember if it was Oppenheimer or Bohr who was just not very good in a room talking. I have a feeling it was Oppenheimer. So I think he was a very good lecturer, but he wasn't good when he was put into a room full of politicians that had to make his case. He spoke too quietly. He paused often because he was a thoughtful person collecting his words. People kept speaking over him. So he was better on a stage giving his opinion than he was in politics, basically going back and forth.
Yeah.
And then you've got the cynic on the far side of things, Klaus Fuchs, who felt like one country having this super powerful weapon was more evil than, I guess, everyone having it. He felt everyone having it would create a stalemate. So he, in a very James Bond-esque way, started getting the information out of the project.
So he was the one that was leaking it to the Soviets?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He was the only person who was basically an active communist, even though there was so much paranoia from Leslie Groves about spies infiltrating and checking everyone's background. Somehow they missed him, and somehow they didn't double check him when he moved from place to place. Somehow he slipped through the cracks, got all of the information out so that the Russian scientists essentially just followed the blueprint that he used and had the bomb within a few years of the war.
What's funny is it's so tempting to think that so much of the like Red Scare fear at the time was just straight paranoia. Like, of course they should be using brilliant people no matter ideology, but it actually was a communist sympathizer that really did leak the bomb information. So yeah, history is not always what you want it to be.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I love all of that stuff.
Yeah.
The different moral attitudes and the different ideologies, the different ways that people approach the problem.
I'd happily watch that movie. I mean, off the back of Oppenheimer as well. Something that did focus on the ideology. That sounds to me like a more interesting film than exploring the rise and fall of the individual man, Robert Oppenheimer. But, until they make that and until they make it a blockbuster Christopher Nolan film.
Yeah. Because you can definitely invite the audience into each argument and then let the audience decide for themselves. Because, some people would think, if they use this once, the world will say, never use this again.
Absolutely.
And some people would think if they used it once, the world might protest, but they might use it again and again.
Yeah.
If not for the chance of retaliation.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's better to be on this knife edge and this false piece of kind of an arms race where mutually assured destruction is preventing us from pulling that trigger. Or maybe it would have been better if just one person had it and then created a dictatorship. It's so many different attitudes about what kind of future
absolutely
you would have seen it play out as and what you would have wanted.
Yeah, it's the fact that the stakes almost literally couldn't be any higher, and that there's no obvious answer, and that there are so many brilliant people that all know the same facts but all have completely different conclusions. That's a perfect space for something like that.
Yeah, it feels so rich and so compelling.
Yeah, multi-million-dollar producers, if you're listening to this, make that film.
Yeah.
Two of us would watch it.
Fallout. Follow the blueprint of Fallout.
I actually really personally want to pick up Fallout now. That sounds really, really interesting.
It's very good. Yeah. I'll try to brush up my facts. So listeners, if mixed up dates or if I mixed up things like that, my apologies.
Yeah.
I remember the substance, but not the details.
I think you did pretty damn well, man. Yeah.
Cool.
Like you're saying physicist names, and for the most part, I'm just smiling and nodding. I know Niels Bohr, I know Einstein. Yeah, I think you did very well with actually bringing some substance to this. So
I'll take that.
Yeah, should we call it there? I think this was pretty robust.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that we might have like a 20-minute conversation, but I feel like we've gone way over.
I don't know
That's
how long
good.
this
That's
was,
good.
but
Yeah. I really enjoyed it.
I don't think we need to
Do
say
we have to
anything to
sign
wrap
off?
up, do
Do
we?
we have a conclusion?
No, I don't think it's
What
like
did you think of the ending?
the very, very ending of the film.
Yeah, the kind of the last scene with Einstein and him staring into the water with the ripples and all.
I got chills and I almost cried. I thought that was
Okay.
incredibly stirring.
Amazing.
So what did you think of the ending, James?
Yeah, I thought it was good. It is.
Oh, okay, that's not what I was expecting. I thought you were like throwing your cornetto at the screen or something like that at that point.
No, not at all. Well, no, not at all. It wouldn't have had. I would have come across that before in like the books that I read. That like that's the situation we're in now, where nuclear holocaust is a potential thing.
I want this. This isn't the first time I've come across this idea. I just find it very, very affecting.
Okay,
yeah. But it is extremely affecting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the way that, without sounding too real and bleak, that humanity might very well end, and it's real, and we're facing it down, and who knows when it could actually occur. It's a terror that we struggle to wake up from. So
yeah.
I thought they did it very, very well. Like that CGI footage at the end of like the waves of fire sweeping across the earth was I found very effective.
Very cool. I think my terror of that is tempered by the idea that if the bomb information hadn't been leaked, would America have continued to nuke countries that it had a problem with, and would that have been a worse state of affairs for us to be in?
I don't know.
Because that was
you know, there's that philosopher struggling thing with his name, Bertrand Russell quote about the man walking the tightrope. Like, yeah, you can expect a man to walk a tightrope for a short amount of time, but can you realistically expect him to walk it for 200 years? Like, you would have come across all of the near misses and scares and times in the Cold War when it accidentally nearly went to nuclear war, but at the very last moment, they're like, oh, wait, it's just like a flock of geese, or oh, wait, it's just like a fuck up in the computer systems, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I know
that's not heartwarming. That doesn't make you think like everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, it's not comforting anyway.
No. What a note to end on, right?
Yeah, probably not the best note. Maybe we can cut that last 10 minutes.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll just end on something positive.
I got nothing.
Yeah, I'm not a positive guy.
Yeah, me neither. That was good. I really enjoyed that, man. You didn't like it for good reasons. That's
okay.
I accept your answer.
I feel like they're personal reasons rather than objective reasons.
Yeah, but that's I get seeing a film and not being the film you want. Like, I've seen plenty of films where I wish it ended a different way, and I just can't help but think like, it should have ended like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I can be generous sometimes,